March 8, 1989. A Tupolev TU-154 airplane had just left Kurgan Airport after refueling. The destination was Leningrad, now called St. Petersburg. But before landing, the flight crew received a note from a passenger. It was a threat. Head to London, otherwise we will blow up the plane. The pilot immediately contacted air traffic control, reporting the threat and requesting guidance. But what the crew didn't know was that immediately, 2 fighter jets had already been scrambled from a nearby military base. Their orders were clear: follow the plane. If it crossed into international airspace, shoot it down. What happened next was one of the most tragic and haunting stories of the Soviet era, a story about the search for freedom. This video contains sensitive content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion advised. Back in the late 70s and 80s, the Soviet Union wasn't the best place to live, battling poverty, empty store shelves, government control, and a collapsing economy. Many sought to leave. However, a regular Soviet citizen traveling abroad, especially to the West, was virtually impossible. The Soviets feared defection, but more importantly, Western influence on their citizens. This is one of the reasons a father and son hijacked a Soviet flight and forced it to land in Turkey was to escape the USSR. This was a huge humiliation to the regime at the time, so the Soviet ramped up flight security, placing undercover, armed agents on board international flights, training and sometimes even arming the crew to handle incidents like these. The Ovechkin family was a big family, living in a rural village called Sosnovka. At the time, the family consisted of 12 members, Mother Nina and her 11 children. By all metrics, the family was quite poor, even by Soviet Union standards at the time, but especially after the death of her husband in 1984, Nina raised her children by herself in Irkutsk. The boys showed a knack for music and started a local music band called the Seven Simeons. Before long, the band became quite famous and even started to win awards at music competitions across the USSR. A story about a family from upcountry was celebrated in newspapers. But despite their great musical achievements, they were barely able to make ends meet. Following the band's tour of Japan, they were impressed by the standards of living in foreign countries, and an idea started to take shape. We've got to escape this place. On March 8, 1998, Airloft's Flight 3739 departed from Irkutsk at exactly 8:05 a.m. heading towards St. Petersburg with a planned stop over Kurgan to refuel. Among the passengers was the Ovechkin family occupying the back of the plane, carrying their instruments. This wasn't unusual as the family was semi-local celebrities. When the flight was nearing St. Petersburg, one member of the family passed over a note to the flight attendant. She immediately took it to the cockpit and it read, "Proceed to England. Do not descend. Otherwise, we will blow up the plane. You are under our control." Immediately upon reading the note, the captain transmitted a distress signal to Vologda Air Traffic Control, alerting them to the unfolding crisis. 2 of the hijackers, the family's eldest sons, Valisy and Oleg, stood up from their seats and pulled out sawed-off shotguns they had smuggled on board, hidden inside the double base. Along with homemade explosives, they took control of the cabin, holding passengers and crew hostage. The captain, along with the flight crew, knew that flying this plane to England was virtually impossible, as the fuel was barely enough to reach St. Petersburg. The pilot suggested a compromise. They would head to Finland to refuel first, as Finland was a neutral country. After some convincing, the family approved this plan, as long as they left Soviet soil. But it was clear they didn't plan this operation very well, because right after the distress signal was sent, multiple fighter jets took off to intercept the plane. Their instructions were simple: follow the plane. If it crosses the border, shoot it down. After some time, the plane started to descend towards the runway. The family began to feel the relief of being outside the grip of the USSR. As the plane approached the ground, some family members even embraced each other, but as we will see, their joy will be short-lived. When the pilot sent the distress signal, he made an announcement to the passengers that they would be landing in Kotka, Finland. But this was just a bluff, a clever trick to fool the hijackers. Their real destination was in fact Vyshevo Air Base, just 50 miles from the Finnish border. Waiting for them on the ground was the Soviet military. The family had no idea they were flying straight into a trap. But just as they approached the runway, the Ovechkins started to notice that something wasn't right. Dmitry noticed Cyrillic writing on a refueling truck as soon as the plane stopped moving. At that moment, the mother and her old sons demanded that they take off immediately, or else they would start killing passengers. Dmitry, in his rage, ended up shooting one of the flight attendants who was trying to calm them down and protect the passengers. Her name was Tamara Zarkaya. She was 28 at the time. The plane came to a halt at the end of the runway. Immediately surrounded by Soviet military personnel and armored vehicles, it stood there for a couple of hours, during which the military tried to negotiate with the Ovechkins, but to no avail. They were too stubborn, rejecting every proposal and refusing to release any of the hostages. They had only one demand: refuel the plane and fly away from this place. But as time passed, they began to realize that this was not going to happen. Their plan was unraveling right before their eyes. After a couple of hours, the Soviet military didn't want to waste any more time. They decided to breach the plane. First, they sent 5 emergency response team ERT members armed with bulletproof vests stormed the cockpit, triggering an intense exchange of gunfire with the hijackers. According to eyewitnesses, they opened indiscriminate fire towards the cabin. At the same time, another group stormed the aircraft from the rear, which caused Alexander Ovechkin to panic and detonate the bomb he was carrying, killing himself and starting a fire in the aircraft's tail section. The Ovechkins found themselves cornered as Soviet forces stormed the plane from both ends. Overwhelmed and desperate, their plan was falling apart before their very eyes. This part of the story is not for the faint of heart, because what the mother did next was nothing short of gut-wrenching. Seeing there was no way out, she ordered her sons to shoot her and then take their own lives. Her oldest son, Vasily, shot her and then turned the gun to himself. The next 2 younger siblings, Dmitry and Oleg, reportedly detonated explosives before shooting themselves. Igor, who was 17 at the time, hid in a toilet. The remaining Ovechkins, 28-year-old Olga, who was pregnant, along with her younger siblings Tatiana, 14, Mikhail, 13, Uliana, 10, and Sergei, the youngest at age 9, all survived by hiding among the other passengers. Several passengers were injured, and 3 of them, along with a flight attendant, were killed during the confrontation. The remaining Ovechkins were arrested by the authorities. Igor and Mikhail later testified and explained the reason behind the hijacking. The Ovechkins couldn't bear life in the Soviet Union any longer and wanted to leave. Their actions were not driven by political ideology or financial gain. They simply longed to escape and live a better life. If you liked this short documentary, please subscribe to this channel, because there is a lot more in the making. Also, if you have a story in mind, please give us your suggestions in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to check our previous videos.